Howdy, Immortalium here, and today I thought it might be interesting to take a look at some early Japanese animation. The anime industry has been around longer than we expect. We kind of associate the anime industry as having kind of properly begun in the 60s, but prior to that there was actually quite a bit of Japanese animation that was produced, and so I thought it might be interesting to take a look at some of these examples today. Now, something that has to be discussed when we discuss these early works of Japanese animation is that a lot of them have been lost, or there isn't very much information about a lot of these early works of animation, how they were released, who worked on them, etc, etc. So I can only tell the facts that I've learned, that I'm aware of, but I will do my best to do so today. So first off, of course, I think it is worth taking a look at the earliest Japanese animation that we are aware of today. A work that was produced in 1907. It's called Katsudo Shashin. And interestingly, I'm going to show the entire work right now. Wasn't that very interesting? So yes, it's a very short work, quite crude in many ways, but quite fascinating nonetheless. I believe I read that the work is about 50 frames long, running at about 18 frames per second, which gives it a runtime of close to 3 seconds. So it's a very short work, but nonetheless it is quite a fascinating one just to see that this could be done in 1907 in Japan. Following on, the next two works of early Japanese animation actually come from 1917, with one of them being tragically lost. So the one that is lost, and forgive me, I will have to take a look at my notes for this one. It's called Imokawa Mukozo Genkanban no Maki. So it's a work from 1917, and despite the fact that it is very clearly historically important, it is unfortunately lost. However, fortunately, the next work is actually available today. Called Nakamura Gatana. It was actually rediscovered in 2008, thankfully. It's a work that follows a samurai who buys a sword and attempts to, practice with it, but he is completely incompetent. It's quite comedic. Here are a couple of clips of the animation style, and it is about 4 minutes long, so it's a considerably more impressive work than Katsudo Shashin, and it's a great example of how far animation progressed in a mere 10 years in Japan. Until 1933, all of these animated shorts that were being produced in Japan were all silent films. But in 1933, Japan ended up releasing its first animated work with voice acting, called Chikara to Onna no Yo no Naka. It's notable, of course, for the fact that it is the first anime work that has voice acting present in it. Although tragically, the film is now lost. There are a few images of stills from it, so I will include those stills here so you can see what the art style looked like. But another very interesting fact about this movie is that a Japanese animator called Mitsuyo Seo worked on this, and Mitsuyo Seo is, as we are going to get onto in a little bit, a very, very important Japanese animator from the time period. During this time, it was pretty hard to actually make money off of these animated works, and they kind of relied on sponsorships in many ways. By the late 1930s, though, they began to transition into being funded by the Japanese government, which was on the verge of World War II. And as you can imagine, a lot of Japanese works that were produced at the time, in particular these animated works, were propaganda films meant to kind of push the government's ideology onto the general population. And quite a notable work from 1942 is Momotaro Sea Eagles. This film was directed by Mitsuyo Seo, who I just mentioned, and it was a whopping 37 minutes long, which was a very, very impressive feat for the then rather small animation industry in Japan. And this work proved to be successful enough that it later got a follow-up. Those who are familiar with the medium of anime, as well as maybe familiar with some of my earlier content on this channel, will be familiar with the film in question, but I'll get onto that in a little bit, because there was a work that I also want to discuss in between, and that is actually the 1943 short film The Spider and the Tulip. Now this film is quite interesting to me in that, first off, it's actually the first film in this list that I actually have in my personal collection that I can actually go down to my Blu-ray player and sit down and watch. And this work is a very, very impressive technical leap for the quality of animation coming from Japan. I'm going to show some animation from this film, but as you can see, it's making use of a wide variety of animation techniques, most notably the multi-plane camera, which gives the images more depth to them. And it's a very, very impressive work. Unfortunately, it does have some politically incorrect elements to it, but regardless, it is a very, very important work. And finally, the last early work of animation from Japan that I wish to discuss, and arguably one of the most important, and that is Momotaro's Sacred Sailors. I believe it's a spiritual successor to Momotaro's Sea Eagles, and it is directed by the same man, Mitsuo Seo, and it is particularly notable for being Japan's first feature-length animated film. I've actually done a review of this film on the channel, but to quickly summarize, while it is a film that is very much pushing the imperialistic ideology that Japan had at the time, there are a lot of very interesting moments within the movie, and actually some surprisingly well done animated sequences. And certainly a film that I think a lot of anime fans should go and seek out, just to kind of get an experience of what these early animated works were like from Japan. But just keep in mind, of course, that this work was produced for propaganda purposes, and you should be okay. But of course, there was a lot of Japanese animation produced during that period that I've discussed, but unfortunately a lot of them have been lost due to the war, due to poor preservation, etc, etc. So it is quite tragic that a lot of these are lost to us today. But nonetheless, it is a fascinating period in the history of the Japanese animation industry. The impact that it has had on the anime industry today is immeasurable. So I always think it's worth discussing these early works, seeking them out, discussing them, etc, etc. So that was my discussion on early Japanese animation. Of course, I would absolutely love to hear, as always, what your thoughts are on all of this. Have you seen any of these animated works? And if you have, what did you think about them? What do you think about the way that animation developed in Japan, perhaps in comparison to some other animation industries in the world? How do you think that these movies have impacted Japanese animation as of today? And of course, if you have any additional information about any of these animated works from the early days in Japan, any of the people involved with these works, etc, etc, please leave it in the comments below. And of course, if you want to support the channel, I would encourage you to use my Amazon and Right Stuf affiliate links in the description below. When you purchase anime or manga through those affiliate links, not only supporting me, not only supporting the channel, but you're also supporting the anime manga industry. So I'd highly encourage you to purchase the anime manga through those affiliate links. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and bye bye.